couple things I do. One, you have to preach to the audience, right? If you do find yourself in an argument, realize you're not going to convert that person that's arguing with you. But what you can do is convert everybody that's reading, right? Especially if you're in a comment section or something like that, you'll always get somebody reading behind the other person you're talking to. So realize.
And we are back with Adam's part 2 interview. If you missed part 1, you can go back and watch that before this one if you want.
How do you think that intactivism can confront and counter the propaganda better?
The level of propaganda you're dealing with is existential, might not even be the right word, right? Past a certain point, you're going to deal with a media machine that is international, right? You're going to have to, because that group is not going to go for it. Right now, they don't care. We're a small kind of fringe movement. As we grow, as more of this happens, as more people go off the reservation, you're going to eventually have to deal with the media mobilizing. Sectors of big business are going to mobilize that you wouldn't even expect. You wouldn't even think that they were even remotely related. And we need to be prepared for that. I don't want the community blindsided by that, because it will happen. I'm already starting to see it. If you pay attention to these things, you can see these pushes. I've seen it in a televised cartoon the other day where there was a push to have this conversation, and it tried to pretend like it was being nonpartisan. It was not nonpartisan. It tried to paint our side of things in a less than favorable light. You're going to see more of that. And if you watch for the push, you'll catch it.
Where are you seeing the push now?
I'm seeing a lot of forced social media, a lot of astroturfing, especially with the front of the internet. When you get into lesser controlled spaces, it's not as bad. But places like Facebook, YouTube, those sorts of things, you're going to see pushes there, Twitter. And I'm seeing a lot of recommended posts, especially on Facebook, that appear to be individuals that aren't, right? They're organizations trying to pretend they're individuals pushing this stuff. I've seen a lot of it being pushed, particularly even in private groups, which you would think you wouldn't encounter, but yeah, heavily, right, in private groups. Through profiles that are supposed to be individuals, but you can tell because of the organized push that it's not. It's like this. So if I see one profile post something, and then another profile that's unrelated to the other profile, where these people don't even know each other, give me a post that's almost identical. If I see enough of that, I can tell there's a push going on. Right? Marching orders got given somewhere. Because you're not going to see profile after profile after profile typing out similar messages, sending them out all inside the same kind of time slots. It's not real people, right? Or it may be real people, but somebody behind a microphone is talking to them, telling them, hey, go out and get this done. This is your job for this week or whatever. It's not genuine. You're going to see a lot of that come from big business. Like I said, it was Paradise PD.
I remember that cartoon, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of gritty.
I saw that episode where they talked about circumcision.
That wasn't funny. I didn't find anything about that funny. I think that was kind of grim and a lighter take on the topic than it needed to be. And like I said, they know they can get you to laugh. They can get you to agree with things that are not rational. I think that was kind of what was going on there.
Paradise PD presented the argument from both sides, which I thought was positive. Sort of positive.
I wouldn't say that it was necessarily positive. So, you'll get an amount of controlled opposition during this, and that's one of the huge things that's going to be a problem. You're going to get people that they're going to pretend like they agree with you, but they don't. You've been in the military, you know what a Blue Falcon is?
Yes.
Okay, so if you got a Blue Falcon on your team, right, how's that work out?
The backstabbers, not well.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're not team players.
Exactly. So if you got somebody that is, hey, I'm part of the team, but I'm really not, or giving out sloppy arguments, they can be more of a detriment than they can a positive. And that's kind of how that came off to me. The kind of people that are behind those shows, I don't see any motivation for them to be honest like that. given through that lens, I don't think really they did a lot of favors the movement. That's a little more nuanced than the answer I gave earlier, but that's the reason why. It's not the only cartoon I've seen it in. I've seen it in other ones recently. When I was in prison, I don't have any sex crimes. I've not got any weird charges. I had a domestic dispute with my mother. She stole my house. It's a whole big thing. Anyway, I actually got put on a kosher camp. There was a rabbi on the camp. He was just constantly telling circumcision jokes. I'm like, bro, just stop. He was in there for sex crimes. He was. Rabbi Levi bin Moses or something like that. With Green Correctional. And he was always telling those kinds of jokes. I found it repugnant. But they do, right? They do that. Here's a funny joke. It normalizes it. I think you're going to see more of it in the media as the movement grows, because the less people that are mutilated, the harder people are to control. When you first get into it, it just seems like some sort of weird cultural moray that we have. But the further you go down the rabbit hole, the more it becomes apparent that it's some sort of trauma-based manipulation.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. If you want a willing, kind of a tepid milquetoast group of people, mutilate their genitals, make sex not as fun, make them dependent on all sorts of products for something that ought to be natural. You'll have a built-in consumer base. You'll have a built-in workforce. And I think as that starts to go away, you're going to have more people that do what we call bucking. They're going to buck the system. They're going to push back against this sort of thing. I think we're already starting to see that, even the boomers that are left over talking about how, nobody wants to work. They're just not working anymore. They won't. Yeah, they won't. They're not getting paid anything. They're tired of the pizza parties. Right? They're sick of that. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that a lot of these guys out here are not cut anymore. And they're a little harder to control. They don't want to just go slave away so they can afford their erectile dysfunction pills for the week. Right?
George Carlin said the corporations that run the country want us smart enough to do the jobs, but dumb enough to not realize working longer hours for less pay and less benefits. And then you don't get Social Security when you try to cash it in.
Yeah, you nailed it. I'm a big fan of George Carlin.
Yeah, I really liked him. He said, when I was an infant, I survived circumcision. A very brutal practice to let you know very early in life that your genitals are not yours.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a slavery component when you go back, follow the culture.
Oh, yeah, it was done to slaves.
Yeah.
The Bible says so.
There's that scene in Roots where they're trying to rename Kuta Kinte to Toby. They're beating on him, and your name's Toby now. It's that same sort of stealing of your identity, trying to rename and control you. It's marking your slave for ownership, sort of branding.
How do you think intactivism needs to improve?
That's a good question. I've given this some thought. So I think making the movement approachable. I think one thing we haven't tackled well enough is there's kind of this dichotomy that gets set up with men, especially the victims of this practice. Take into account maybe a guy that has underwent circumcision. You're an adult now, you're single, and now you see this movement where they're saying you're defunct, your sexual organs are broken. There's not a lot of appeal to join, right? Because what you're doing, if you join the movement, is you're joining a movement that may decrease your odds of garnering a mate. And in this day and age, odds are already not good. So what we have to do is find some way to lessen the impact of that. Because guys are not going to want to put themselves out of mates, right? You don't want to relegate yourself to a situation where you're forever alone just to bolster your principles. Most people won't do that. I'm the kind of guy I will. I'll bite the hand that feeds. I will do that thing. Not everybody's going to do that. It's going to be very, very few. It's not as bad now. A few years back, it was pretty bad. I saw a big push that was like trying to approach it from a feminist angle where it's like, oh, it makes sex bad for women and stuff like that. That's not doing favors to the movement, right? It's not, because now you got these guys that are looking from the outside in going, oh, if I join this movement, I'm decreasing my sexual marketplace value. And we got to make sure that as we move forward, we're not putting victims out in the cold. We need to make sure that in our message that it's very clear that these guys are victims, right? When you're going to choose a mate, that they not be relegated to the sidelines just because they've been a victim of sexual abuse. I don't think that anybody in their right mind would tolerate a guy turning down a woman just because she'd been sexually abused. I think if somebody voiced that out loud, I think it would cause pandemonium, rightfully so. And I think that's part of the trap. I think that's part of what keeps it going as a meme. Is these guys that have been subjected to this, they're put in this catch-22. Admit I'm broken and break the cycle. Possibly be alone, possibly lower my sexual marketplace value, or pretend I'm okay and continue the cycle of violence. I want to see that cycle broken. I want to see that catch-22 broken. So what I don't want to see is feminist first approach of, I don't want to be with no mutilated guy. I don't think that does us any favors, to be blunt. I'm not seeing it as bad. I've talked to a lot of people in the community that were doing it, so I'm not seeing it as much. But there for several years, it was pretty heavy. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a men's rights issue first. It really is.
Hey guys, it's me, Pots. I'm briefly interrupting this interview to let you know about the Pots e-commerce program. It is vital to keeping the Prevail Over the System channel alive. Go and join us on our Discord to learn more. And best of all, it's free to partake in the Pots e-commerce program, and we don't need any of your information whatsoever. This helps us keep the interviews coming along with other Intactivist content to empower, teach, and update Intactivists with very important information, as well as being the voice for the Intactivist public. Thank you all so much. Okay, now back to the interview.
How can Intactivists get men's rights activists to join Intactivism?
Well, I think you have a lot of them already on board. I found Intactivism and men's rights at the same time, really. You have a lot of men's rights guys already on board. That's a great avenue. Like I said, approaching it from a women first issue, that's going to hurt us because it's going to devalue the movement to men, and that's not what you want. I think if you approach it from the angle that it is a men's rights issue and that we are fighting for men's rights, I think you're going to bring in a lot of disenfranchised guys that are out in the cold. They don't have anybody representing them. I think that will grow the movement. Approaching it from the notion that men's rights are largely ignored in a lot of regards, that's the way to go. To make it more appealing to men's rights activists, I think most of your men's rights activists are already on our side. The ones that aren't, they got to be in extreme margins. You can't promote men's rights and be okay with having the most important part of their sexual organ cut off against their will. That's just not how rights work.
That's a contradiction there.
Absolutely. Again, we're back to maintaining logical consistency.
So if you can get some men's rights activists on board by telling them that, what would you say to get them to talk to the other ones who really don't want to face the truth about circumcision so that they can get them on board? It is a challenge that we currently face.
It is. Okay. So there's one thing I do know about cognitive dissonance. It's that a direct approach almost never works because you drive those people further into that cognitive dissonance. It's counterproductive. So what you need to do when dealing with these people is approach them in a tangential way. Give them enough information to arrive at the conclusion on their own, or at least feel like they do. And I think you'll see greater success with that. Outright arguing with people. I had a hunter safety instructor years and years ago. He was talking about hunting versus anti-hunting, and he's like, look, when it comes to the online thing, arguing back and forth, nobody ever gives up ground, right? They're kind of set in their ways, and they don't give up ground. And so there's a couple things I do. One, you have to preach to the audience, right? If you do find yourself in an argument, realize you're not going to convert that person that's arguing with you. But what you can do is convert everybody that's reading, right? Especially if you're in a comment section or something like that, you'll always get somebody reading behind the other person you're talking to. So realize when you're having this conversation, you're talking to them too.
Win over the audience.
Exactly. Yeah. Win over the audience. Make sure you're always trying to win over the audience. For starters, when you're dealing with trying to convert somebody, try to avoid cognitive dissonance at all costs. When you're talking to somebody, don't make them feel attacked, right? Mention things offhand that aren't related. Push that logical consistency. If I come to you and I'm like, look, remain logically consistent at all times. If you just practice logical consistency, you arrive at the conclusion that it's wrong. You will. Because you can't be logically consistent and admit that female genital mutilation is wrong and not admit too that male genital mutilation is wrong. You wind up logically inconsistent. So preach logical consistency to these people. Eventually they'll come over. If you want to expose them to the topic, do it tangentially. Do it in passing. Don't do it in a threatening manner, because you will just make an enemy. Don't make enemies. We want to make friends.
So would that be asking them about something they already believe in and then connecting it into this cause?
When you're talking about male genital mutilation, you're talking about some really diehard people. They've got a lot invested in this real world stuff. Okay. We're not talking about philosophical, esoteric investment. We're talking about real life, affects you in the real world consequences, right? If it catches on that mutilation causes sexual problems, we're back to that I'm putting myself out in the cold issue. You don't want to make them feel like that. If you make them feel like that, they're going to leave. They're going to put up resistance because they're trying to defend their own self-interest. And so you don't want to deal with that hurdle. What you want to do is, again, preach logical consistency to them. I don't think anybody in their right mind overtly would argue in favor of logical inconsistency. They're not going to do that. Preach logical consistency to them. Talk to them about that enough. Then when you broach the topic of genital mutilation, bring up female genital mutilation first. And when they're like, yeah, that's abhorrent, it's terrible, it's awful. Well, what about male genital mutilation? Okay, well, if you were on board with the logical consistency argument, you're kind of over a barrel. You kind of have to admit.
You don't approve of that either.
Yeah. I think what we have is an issue that's actually a philosophical issue. How do we know what we know, right? How is information passed? And get into like logical fallacies, that sort of thing. You're trying to avoid that logical fallacy of logical inconsistency. People hold logical inconsistencies a lot more than they realize. If you can talk to them about that, get them agreeing with you on that, when the topic of mutilation comes up, it's kind of a no-brainer. They're going to have to, because they're going to be butting heads with two different types of cognitive dissonance. Either I'm wrong about agreeing with logical inconsistency, or it's okay to be logically inconsistent this time and support something that's honestly monstrous. I think getting that conversation about maintaining logical consistency is important. Have that conversation first. Anytime you win somebody over, you're working on them. You've got a homework assignment anytime you're trying to win somebody over. You're not going to do it in one conversation. You're not going to do it in maybe five, which is a hurdle we have to deal with. I think as things move forward, there's going to be less of that because you're going to have more of these guys that are uncut growing up, entering the fray. I think this is the first generation where the majority of the population was uncut. Don't quote me on that. I think I saw that somewhere recently. I think less than half are cut now. And so as the masses sway towards, because these guys that are uncut aren't going to want to do it to their kids. right? You're not going to have the adamant father problem so much. So I think you'll have less of that bandwagoning effect over time. In some ways, the fight's going to be harder because there's going to be more money and more resources leveraged against us. But on the other hand, we're going to have numbers. And I think really the cultural bandwagoning issue is going to be on our side. I don't see this continuing. I really don't. You've heard it said, I don't think circumcision has a future in America. I really don't.
Okay, that was Adam part 2. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'm going to put all of his links down in the description so you can follow him. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss his other interviews and our other Intactivist content we release every single week. Please share and like this video to get this out to more people. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!